6 years after one unforgettable night, her 5-year-old twins suddenly call the feared Korean mafia heir Daddy right in the middle of the airport, and he turns deathly pale as he realizes those children have his eyes. Some nights refuse to stay buried. They crawl back through the years, wearing different faces, speaking in voices you never expected to hear. For Kang Min-jae, heir to an empire built on whispered threats and blood-signed contracts, that night had been 6 years of searching. 6 years of empty leads and cold trails. 6 years of a ghost he couldn't forget, a warmth he couldn't replace. He'd turned over every stone in Seoul, then New York, then London. His people feared him, his enemies respected him. But one woman had simply vanished, taking something he didn't know he'd given until she was gone. For Zara Williams, that night had been an escape that became a prison. She'd run from a world she didn't understand. From a man whose touch burned hotter than safety allowed. From a future that terrified her more than any threat. She'd built a life in the margins, in the quiet spaces between cities, raising 2 children who had his eyes and her fire. She told herself she'd made the right choice. She told herself he would never find them. She was wrong on both counts, because fate doesn't ask permission. And airports, crowded, chaotic airports, have a way of making the impossible collide. The terminal smelled like coffee and fear. Min-jae moved through it like winter itself, silent and inevitable, leaving cold in his wake. His security detail flanked him at a distance, dark suits and darker intentions. He didn't need to raise his voice. He never had. Power lived in the spaces between words, in the weight of a glance, in the way people looked away before he even noticed them. At 29, he wore his legacy like armor, the underground king who controlled half of Seoul's shadows and all of its secrets. His flight to New York was routine. Business. Always business. Expand the family's legitimate fronts. Smile for cameras at galas that pretended men like him could be civilized. He was reaching for his phone when he heard it. Small, clear, impossible. Daddy, Daddy, look! The word hit him like a blade between ribs. Min-jae turned, controlled, expression neutral, even as his pulse spiked. 2 children pressed against the terminal window. A boy and girl, maybe 5, holding hands, noses smudged against glass. The boy had dark hair that fell like Min-jae's own. The girl had softer curls, lighter at the ends, but the same sharp jawline. Their eyes. God. Their eyes. Dark almond-shaped mirrors of his own face stared back at him with innocent wonder. His breath caught. Impossible. The girl turned, still holding her brother's hand. Mommy, when does our plane come? And then Min-jae saw her. Zara, 6 years older. Hair longer, pulled back, exhaustion carved into the corners of her eyes, but still her. Still the woman who'd disappeared from his bed. His life, his every waking thought like smoke. She was looking down at her phone, distracted. She hadn't seen him yet. The children had. The boy pointed. Mommy, that man looks like us. Zara's head snapped up. Their eyes met across 30 feet of terminal chaos. The world stopped. Her face went white, then red, then something close to terror. The coffee cup in her hand trembled. Min-jae didn't move, couldn't. Because in that single moment, 6 years of questions answered themselves. She'd been pregnant, she'd run, and she'd never told him. He had children. The realization didn't arrive gently. Zara's first instinct was to run, again. Her hand tightened on Kai and Mira's shoulders, pulling them close, but her legs wouldn't move. Because Min-jae was already walking toward them, not rushing, not calling out, just moving with that terrible, patient inevitability she remembered too well. People parted for him without knowing why. His security detail held back, but their presence pressed against the crowd like a held breath. Zara's heart hammered. 6 years. She'd had 6 years to prepare for this moment, and now that it was here, every word she'd rehearsed evaporated. Mommy? Mira's small voice cut through her panic. Why do you look scared? Because the man walking toward them owned half the underworld. Because one night with him had rewritten her entire life. Because she'd convinced herself he'd never find them. Min-jae stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to see every detail. Far enough to be polite. His eyes moved from her face to the children, then back. Searching. Calculating. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she remembered. Quieter and infinitely more dangerous. Zara. Not a question. A statement. An acknowledgement. A sentencing. She swallowed. Min-jae. Kai tilted his head, studying the stranger with unsettling intelligence. Do we know you? Something flickered in Min-jae's expression. Pain, maybe. Or fury compressed so tightly it looked like calm. No, he said softly. But I think we should. Mira, bolder than her brother, stepped forward. You're really tall. Are you a giant? Min-jae's lips almost smiled. Almost. Something like that. His gaze lifted back to Zara. We need to talk. It wasn't a request. She knew that tone. Knew what happened to people who refused him. But she also knew what happened to people who got too close. The children will be safe, he interrupted. Safer than they've ever been. You have my word. His word. As if that meant something. As if his world didn't devour everything soft and good. But Kai was watching Min-jae with open curiosity now, and Mira had already grabbed his hand like he belonged to them. Zara felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't a man she could run from twice. Min-jae led them to a private lounge with a single gesture. His security cleared the space without a word. Suddenly they were alone, her, him, and 2 children, who had no idea their father was a king in a kingdom built on fear. Kai climbed onto a leather chair, legs swinging. Mira pressed close to Zara, suddenly shy now that the stranger had her full attention. Min-jae stood near the window, backlit by tarmac lights. He looked older than she remembered. Harder. But when he watched the children, something in him cracked just enough to let light through. How old are they? His voice was steady. Too steady. 5, last month. The math was simple. Brutal. His jaw tightened. You knew. I didn't. She stopped. Started again. I found out 2 weeks after that night. I tried to find you, but your people said you'd left the country. Then I heard things. Stories. Stories. He said it like the word tasted bitter. About who I am. What I do. Zara met his eyes. About what happens to people who get close to you. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he crouched down, eye level with Kai and Mira. His movements were careful, gentle, like he was approaching something precious and breakable. Do you know who I am? He asked them. Mira shook her head. Kai studied him with those 2 sharp eyes. You're someone important. People are scared of you. Min-jae's expression didn't change. Yes. But you're not scary, Mira added. You have sad eyes. That cracked him. Just for a second, just enough. He looked at Zara and she saw it. The 6 years he'd spent searching. The empire he'd torn apart looking for her. The rage and relief and something deeper. Something that looked dangerously close to love. I would have protected you, he said quietly. All of you. If you'd let me. Zara's throat tightened. I was protecting them from your world. And now? She looked at her children. At the way Mira had moved closer to Min-jae without fear. At the way Kai watched him like he recognized something essential. Now I don't think I have a choice. Choice was a luxury Zara had abandoned the moment she saw 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test in a London hotel bathroom. She'd been 23, alone, carrying the children of a man whose last name she'd only learned from a news article 3 days later, Kang Min-jae, heir to the Kang family. A name whispered in the same breath as words like organization and untouchable and dangerous. She'd run because staying meant drowning. Now, watching him crouch before their children with a gentleness that contradicted everything she'd convinced herself about him, Zara wondered if she'd been running from the wrong thing all along. Min-jae's hand hovered near Mira's face, not quite touching, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he reached too close. The little girl didn't flinch. Instead, she reached up and grabbed his finger with her small hand. You have the same hands as Kai, Mira announced, comparing Min-jae's long fingers to her brother's. See? The same. Something shifted in Min-jae's expression. Not softness, he was too controlled for that, but a crack in the armor wide enough for emotion to bleed through. Kai, more cautious than his sister, stayed on his chair but leaned forward with interest. Are you from Korea? Mommy says that's where half of us comes from. Min-jae's eyes flicked to Zara. A question and an accusation. She'd told them something at least. She'd given them pieces of a heritage she'd tried to protect them from. I am, Min-jae said, his voice careful. Seoul, have you ever been? Both children shook their heads. Mommy says maybe one day, Kai offered, when it's safe. The word hung in the air like a blade. Safe. As if anywhere could be safe from what Min-jae was. From what he represented. He stood slowly, his attention shifting fully to Zara. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that only she could hear it beneath the ambient noise of the terminal beyond their private sanctuary. "We're going to talk, properly, but not here." It wasn't a question, but Zara answered anyway. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You already did, 6 years ago." His eyes held hers. "And you've been running ever since. I'm tired of chasing ghosts, Zara. Clearly, you're tired of running. So we're going to sit down, somewhere private, and you're going to tell me why you thought keeping my children from me was protecting anyone." The possessive hit her like a physical thing. My children. As if biology alone granted him ownership. As if the last 5 years of sleepless nights and scraped knees and first words and fever scares meant nothing compared to his genetic claim. "They're not..." She stopped herself. Because they were. Undeniably. Kai had his analytical mind, the way he studied problems until he solved them. Mira had his stubborn conviction, the certainty that the world would bend if she pushed hard enough. And both of them had his eyes. Those dark, devastating eyes that saw too much and forgave too little. Min-jae waited. Patient. Inevitable. Behind him, through the glass, Zara could see his security detail stationed at every exit. Not threatening. Just present. A reminder that men like Min-jae didn't make requests. They made realities, and you either accepted them or got crushed beneath them. "I have a flight to catch," she said weakly. "I'll buy you a new one, or a plane, whatever you need." He said it like it was nothing, like reshaping someone's entire life was as simple as a phone call. Maybe for him, it was. Mira tugged on Min-jae's sleeve. He looked down at her, and his expression did something complicated. "Are you going to come with us?" the little girl asked. "Would you like me to?" Min-jae asked back. Mira considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. "Yes. You feel like you're supposed to be here. Like when puzzle pieces fit right." Out of the mouths of children, truth arrived unfiltered and devastating. Min-jae's throat worked. Just once. Then he looked at Zara with something that might have been hope if hope didn't look so much like a threat when a man like him wore it. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to let me meet my children. Really meet them. And then we'll figure out what comes next." What comes next? As if the next part wasn't already written. As if his world didn't consume everything it touched. But Kai was watching Min-jae with open curiosity now, and Mira had already decided he belonged, and Zara was so desperately tired of carrying everything alone. "One conversation," she heard herself say. "Supervised. Somewhere public." Min-jae's lips curved, not quite a smile. "I own half the public spaces in this city. But I'll let you choose the location." Of course he did. Of course. Zara closed her eyes. When she opened them, Min-jae was still there. Still waiting. Still looking at her like she was the ghost, and he was the one trying to prove she was real. "There's a park, near Central Park West. It has a playground. I'll have it secured." "No." Her voice came out firmer than she felt. "No security, no guards, just you." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. "I don't go anywhere without security." "Then I guess you're not that interested in meeting your children." They stared at each other. A battle of wills fought in silence while Kai and Mira played with a tablet one of Min-jae's people had quietly provided. Finally, Min-jae nodded. Once. Sharp. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., just me." Zara didn't let herself feel relieved. Relief was dangerous. It made you forget that men like Min-jae didn't compromise. They strategized. "Tomorrow," she agreed. He pulled a card from his jacket. Heavy stock. Embossed. A phone number, nothing else. "If you run again, I'll find you. You know I will. But this time, I'm asking you not to. For them." He glanced at the children, and his expression cracked again. Just slightly, just enough. Zara took the card. Their fingers brushed. The contact was electric, immediate, and deeply unwelcome. 6 years, and her body still remembered his touch like a brand. Min-jae felt it too. She saw it in the way his pupils dilated, the way his breath caught just slightly. "Tomorrow," he repeated. Then he did something she didn't expect. He walked over to Kai and Mira, crouched down again, and spoke to them with a gentleness that contradicted every story she'd ever heard about the Kang family heir. "I have to go now, but I'm going to see you tomorrow. Is that okay?" Mira nodded enthusiastically. Kai studied him for a long moment, then asked, "Are you our dad?" The question stopped time. Min-jae looked at Zara. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but watch as Min-jae turned back to Kai and said simply, "Yes, I think I am." And just like that, everything changed. Min-jae didn't return to his hotel. He went to the Manhattan safe house, the one his family kept for situations that required discretion and soundproof rooms. His security detail knew better than to ask questions. They'd seen the airport footage, seen him stop mid-stride like he'd been shot, seen the way he'd looked at those children. Jae-sung, his head of security and closest thing to a friend, poured him whiskey without being asked. Min-jae took it, but didn't drink. He stood at the window overlooking the city, watching lights blur into constellations, and tried to process the fact that he was a father. A father. The word felt foreign. Impossible. He'd spent 6 years searching for Zara Williams, had mobilized resources across 3 continents, had followed leads that went nowhere and bribed officials who knew nothing. He'd told himself it was about closure, about understanding why a woman he'd spent one perfect night with had vanished like she'd never existed. He'd lied. It was never about closure. It was about the way she'd looked at him that night. Not with fear or calculation, but with something genuine. Something he'd never seen in his world of alliances and ulterior motives. She'd touched him like he was just a man. Not the heir, not the future head of the Kang organization, just Min-jae. And when she'd disappeared, she'd taken that feeling with her. Now he knew why she'd run. She'd been protecting them. From him. From his world. From everything he represented. The thought sat in his chest like broken glass. "You going to drink that, or just hold it?" Jae-sung asked from across the room. Min-jae set the glass down untouched. "I have children." "Yeah, I got that." Jae-sung leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You also have about 1,000 questions to answer. Starting with, what are you going to tell your father?" The Kang patriarch. A man who'd built an empire on blood and maintained it through fear. A man who saw children as assets or liabilities, never just children. Min-jae's jaw tightened. Nothing. Not yet. He's going to find out. You had half your security detail at that airport. Word travels. Then let it travel. But I'm not bringing this to him until I understand what I'm dealing with. What he was dealing with. As if his children were a problem to solve rather than people to know. But that was the language of his world. Everything was strategy. Everything was leverage. Even family. Especially family. Jae-sung watched him with the knowing expression of someone who'd been by Min-jae's side since they were teenagers. "You're thinking about keeping them separate, your world and theirs. Wouldn't you? I'm not the one who just found out I'm a father." Jae-sung pushed off the wall. "But yeah, if I were you, I'd keep them as far from this life as possible, which means you've got a choice to make." Min-jae knew what he meant. The organization didn't do separation. You were in or you were out, and out usually meant dead. His father had made that clear from the moment Min-jae could understand words. The Kang legacy was absolute. But those children, Kai and Mira, they were innocent. Untouched by the violence and corruption that funded their bloodline. And Zara had kept them that way for 5 years. 5 years of raising them alone. 5 years of protecting them from him. The thought was both painful and strangely humbling. "I'm meeting them tomorrow," Min-jae said. "Just me. No security, no organization. Just..." He trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Just you," Jae-sung supplied. "You know that's dangerous, right? You without security? I've been dangerous my whole life. One afternoon won't kill me. It's not you I'm worried about." Jae-sung's expression turned serious. "You've got enemies, Min. Lots of them. And if they find out you've got children, those kids become targets." The words hit like a fist to the gut. Of course they did. In his world, weakness was exploited. Love was leverage. Family was a vulnerability to be protected or destroyed. He'd spent his entire life watching his father eliminate threats. Watching people disappear for knowing too much or asking too many questions. And now he had 2 5-year-olds who looked at him with his own eyes and didn't know what kind of monster their genetics had tied them to. "I'll protect them," Min-jae said quietly. "How? By pulling them into this world? By putting guards on them 24/7? By teaching them to sleep with one eye open?" Jae-sung shook his head. "Or by staying away, letting them live normal lives. letting her keep doing what she's been doing. Stay away. The rational part of Min-jae knew it was the right answer. The safe answer. The answer that kept Kai and Mira in whatever quiet life Zara had built for them, far from the violence and corruption of the Kang Empire. But the irrational part, the part that had spent 6 years searching, the part that had felt something crack open in his chest when Mira grabbed his hand, that part refused. I can't, he said simply. I know. Jae-sung sighed. Which is why you need a plan, a real one. Because tomorrow you're going to sit in that park and play father, and it's going to feel good. It's going to feel right. And then you're going to have to figure out how to be in their lives without destroying them. Min-jae turned from the window. What would you do? Honestly? Jae-sung met his eyes. I'd burn the whole organization down before I let it touch my kids. But I'm not the heir to the Kang family. You are. And that means your choices aren't just yours. The weight of it settled over Min-jae like a familiar coat. Heavy, suffocating, inescapable. He'd been born into this empire, raised to lead it. Trained to be ruthless, strategic, untouchable. But none of that training prepared him for the way Mira had looked at him and said, "You have sad eyes." None of it prepared him for Kai's question, "Are you our dad?" And none of it prepared him for the fact that the answer was yes, and yes meant everything had to change. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He knew who it was before he opened it. The park on 81st, 2 p.m. Don't be late. Zed. Min-jae stared at the message. 3 sentences that felt like a lifeline and a noose all at once. Tomorrow, he said to himself. Tomorrow he'd meet his children, really meet them. And then he'd figure out how to be their father without letting his father's empire devour them whole. The night was long and sleepless. Zara sat in the cramped hotel room she'd booked under a false name, watching Kai and Mira sleep in the double bed they'd insisted on sharing. They always slept like that, tangled together, finding comfort in each other the way twins do, like they were still sharing space in the womb, still one unit split into 2 bodies. She'd done everything right, kept them off the grid, moved every 18 months, used cash, avoided cameras, taught them to be careful about what they shared online, even at 5 years old. Built a life in the margins where surveillance couldn't reach and questions didn't follow. She'd become a ghost by choice, teaching her children to be shadows. She'd built a life in the shadows because the light was too dangerous. And in one airport encounter, all of it had crumbled. Min-jae knew. He knew, and he wasn't the kind of man who let go of things that belonged to him. The thought made her stomach twist. Not because she thought he'd hurt them, she'd seen the way he'd looked at them, and whatever else he wasn't cruel to children. But because she knew what his world demanded: loyalty, obedience, a willingness to get your hands dirty and never ask questions, a willingness to become something harder than human. She'd researched the Kang family after that night, had found articles buried in Korean news sites, speculation on American crime blogs, whispers in places where people talked about things the law couldn't touch. The Kangs weren't just wealthy. They were untouchable. They controlled shipping routes and politicians, owned judges and police precincts, had fingers in every pie from real estate to pharmaceuticals to things that didn't have names in legal documents. They moved through the world like sharks, silent, efficient, devastating. And Min-jae was being groomed to inherit all of it, the crown prince of an empire built on fear. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I keep my promises. Tomorrow. Just me. MJ. She stared at the message. He'd actually agreed. No security, no guards, just him. Either he was serious about meeting the children on neutral ground, or he was a better liar than she'd given him credit for. Probably both. Men like Min-jae didn't survive by being predictable. Zara typed back, "If I see anyone who looks like security, we leave." His response came immediately. Understood. But you should know, I don't need security to be dangerous. It should have scared her. Instead, it felt like honesty. The first truly honest thing anyone had said to her in 6 years. A confession disguised as a warning. She put the phone down and looked at her children again. Kai stirred, mumbling something in his sleep about airplanes. Mira's hand found his automatically, even unconscious, her small fingers curling around his wrist like an anchor. They were so innocent, so untouched by the violence that had shaped their father, by the darkness that ran in their veins whether they knew it or not. How did she let him into their lives without letting in the darkness that followed him? How did she explain to them that the man with the sad eyes was both their father and someone the world feared? That his gentleness with them was the exception, not the rule? That people whispered his name and looked over their shoulders? The questions chased themselves through her mind until exhaustion finally pulled her under. She dreamed of that night. The one that had changed everything. She'd been in Seoul for work, a translation contract for a tech conference. 3 weeks of work, decent pay, a chance to see a city she'd only read about. He'd been at the hotel bar, alone, which seemed impossible for someone who looked like him. Expensive suit, dangerous eyes, the kind of presence that made people notice and then quickly look away, like staring at the sun. She'd been jet-lagged and reckless. Had sat down next to him because the bar was crowded and the seat was empty. Had said something stupid about the bartender's pour being too generous, how she'd asked for wine and gotten half a bottle in a glass. He'd smiled. Actually smiled. Not the polite smile people gave strangers, but something real. Something that reached his eyes and made them less dangerous for a moment. And for the next 6 hours, they'd talked like normal people. About music and cities and the way certain words felt different in different languages. About how Seoul felt like the future and the past colliding. About the loneliness of hotel rooms and the peculiar intimacy of talking to strangers you'd never see again. He'd told her his name was Min. Just Min. She'd believed him because she'd wanted to. Because in that moment, he'd seemed like just a man. Tired. A little sad. Looking for something he couldn't name. And when he'd kissed her in the elevator, she'd felt something she'd never felt before. Safe and dangerous all at once. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing someone would catch you if you jumped. Like falling and flying were the same thing. They'd spent one perfect night together. Talking until talking turned into touching. Touching until the rest of the world disappeared. And in the morning, he was gone. Just a note on hotel stationery. You made me forget who I'm supposed to be. Thank you. M. 2 weeks later, she was pregnant. 3 weeks later, she saw his face on a news site. Kang Min-jae, heir, empire, untouchable. The man who'd told her about his favorite bookstore in Hongdae was the same man linked to organized crime across 3 continents. She'd run because staying meant drowning. Now she wondered if running had just been another way to drown slowly. Morning came too fast. Kai and Mira woke excited, asking questions about the tall man with sad eyes. But was he coming? Would he bring presents? Did he know any good stories? Zara dressed them carefully, fixed Mira's curls, made sure Kai's shirt was buttoned right. Normal things, routine things, things that felt like armor against the enormity of what was about to happen. She packed snacks and water bottles, brought the small first aid kit she always carried, checked exits and routes like she always did. Survival habits died hard. The park was busy when they arrived, Sunday crowds, families and joggers and tourists taking photos of trees turning autumn colors. Zara found a bench near the playground where she could see all the entrances, her back to a wall. Old instincts. Kai and Mira ran toward the swings, their laughter bright and uncomplicated, the sound of children who didn't know to be afraid yet. At exactly 2 p.m., Min-jae appeared. He'd kept his promise, no security detail, no suits flanking him. No earpieces or obvious weapons, just him in jeans and a simple black shirt, looking almost normal except for the way he moved. Controlled, aware, dangerous even in casual clothes. He scanned the park like he was reading a tactical map, checking angles, marking exits. Then his eyes found hers, and something in him softened. Just slightly. Just enough. He stopped a few feet from her bench. Close but not crowding. Respectful of the space she needed. Zara, you came alone. I said I would. He looked toward the playground where Kai was pushing Mira on the swing, careful and protective the way he always was with his sister. They're beautiful. They're everything. Her voice came out fiercer than she intended. And I won't let your world touch them. Min-jae turned to her, and his expression was complicated. Pain and understanding, and something that looked like regret. My world has already touched them. I'm their father. That's not something we can undo. We could try. Could we? He sat down next to her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough to remember how his skin had felt against hers 6 years ago. Or are you going to spend the rest of your life running? Teaching them to hide? Making them afraid of half their heritage? The words stung because they were true. Kai had started asking questions. Why didn't they have family photos like other kids? Why did they move so much? Why couldn't they visit Korea, the place Mommy said was part of them? Why didn't they have grandparents or cousins or anyone? She'd avoided the answers because the truth was too complicated, too dangerous. Because how did you tell a 5-year-old that half his DNA came from a crime lord? Min-jae watched the children with an expression that was part wonder, part pain, part something tender that didn't fit with everything else she knew about him. I didn't know, he said quietly. If I had known, you would have what? Given up your empire? Walked away from your family? Zara shook her head. We both know that's not how your world works. You don't just leave. People who try to leave end up... She stopped herself, but he finished the thought. Dead. Yeah, they do. He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. But I would have tried. For them, maybe even for you. The honesty in his voice cracked something in her chest, made her remember the man in the hotel bar who'd talked about poetry and loneliness, not the heir who made people disappear. That night, she started, then stopped. Started again. You said I made you forget who you were supposed to be. You did. Who are you supposed to be, Min-jae? He was quiet for a long time, watching Mira's delighted shriek as Kai pushed her higher. Someone who doesn't get to want things, he said finally. Someone who serves the family, the organization, the legacy. Someone who makes decisions based on strategy, not emotion. Someone who sees people as assets or threats, not just people. And who are you actually? His eyes met hers, and they were full of something raw. I'm still figuring that out, but I know I'm their father, and I know I'm not walking away. I've already lost 6 years. I won't lose more. Before Zara could respond, Mira came running over, breathless and grinning, her cheeks flushed with joy. You came. Kai said you wouldn't, but I knew you would. I told him you promised, and promises are important. Min-jae's entire expression transformed, softened in a way that made him look younger, less burdened. I promised, didn't I? Come push me. I want to go really high, higher than Kai pushes me. Mira grabbed his hand without hesitation, pulling. Min-jae looked at Zara, a question in his eyes. Permission. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, past the realization that this was real, this was happening. There was no going back. And then she watched as Kang Min-jae, heir to a criminal empire, one of the most dangerous men in 2 continents, carefully pushed his daughter on a swing and listened to her chatter about butterflies and ice cream, and whether clouds were actually soft or just looked soft. I think they're soft, Min-jae said seriously, like cotton candy. Have you touched one? Mira asked. No, have you? Not yet, but someday I will. I'm going to be a pilot. A pilot? Min-jae's voice was gentle. That's a good dream. Kai wants to be a scientist. He likes to figure out how things work. What do you do? The question was innocent, devastating. Min-jae's eyes flicked to Zara, then back to Mira. I help run my family's business. What kind of business? Different things, import, export, investments. All technically true. All carefully sanitized. Mira seemed satisfied. That sounds boring. You should do something more fun, like flying planes. Maybe you're right, Min-jae said softly. Kai joined them eventually, more cautious but curious, his analytical mind already working. You're really our dad? He asked directly. Min-jae crouched down to his level. Yes, I am. Why weren't you here before? Out of the mouths of children. The question that mattered most. Min-jae's jaw worked. Because I didn't know you existed. Your mother had reasons for not telling me. Good reasons. And I wish things had been different, but they weren't. But I'm here now. If you'll let me be. Kai studied him with unsettling intensity. Do you know how to play chess? I do. Will you teach me? If you want. Kai considered this, then nodded. Once, sharp. A mirror of Min-jae's own gestures. Okay, you can stay. And just like that, permission granted. Min-jae's throat worked. He looked at Zara, and his eyes were wet. For the next hour, Zara watched them. Watched Min-jae push Mira on the swings until she screamed with laughter. Watched him sit on the ground with Kai and draw battle strategies in the dirt with a stick, explaining tactics that definitely came from his real life, but sounded like games to a 5-year-old. Watched him be gentle and patient and present in a way that contradicted everything she'd built him up to be in her mind. He bought them ice cream from a vendor. Chocolate for Mira, vanilla for Kai. Asked their preferences. Remembered their answers. Wiped Mira's face when chocolate dripped down her chin. When Kai asked about Korea, Min-jae told him about the palaces and the mountains, about street food and festivals, about a country Kai had never seen but carried in his bones. His voice went soft when he talked about it, like homesickness and love tangled together, and Zara realized with creeping certainty that this wasn't going to be simple. That you couldn't just let someone be a father on weekends and keep the darkness separate. That Min-jae was right. His world had already touched them the moment his DNA had combined with hers. The question wasn't whether he'd be in their lives. The question was what kind of father he'd choose to be, what he'd sacrifice, what he'd protect. An hour passed, then 2. The sun shifted, casting long shadows. Families came and went, and in that pocket of ordinary time, they almost looked normal. Almost looked like they could be a family. Almost looked like the violence and empires and danger didn't exist. But reality had a way of crashing in. Zara saw them first. 3 men. Standing too still at the park's edge. Watching. Not casual observers. Not parents or joggers. They had the same controlled stillness Min-jae had. The same awareness. Predators recognizing predators. One of them raised a phone, taking photos. Of Min-jae. Of the children. Of her. Zara's blood went cold. Min-jae saw her expression change. Followed her gaze. His entire body went rigid, every muscle coiling. His hand moved almost imperceptibly, and she knew he was reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Zara. His voice was different, colder, the voice of the man who made people disappear, the voice of the heir. Take the children. Now. What? Now. He stood smoothly, positioning himself between them and the men, a human shield. Go to the Metropolitan Museum. Stay in crowds. Don't stop moving. I'll find you. Min-jae? One of the men started walking toward them, purposeful. The other 2 fanned out, cutting off exits. Min-jae's hand moved to his phone, but Zara grabbed his arm. You said no security. That's not my security. His eyes were dark, deadly. Everything soft about him gone like it had never existed. That's someone who shouldn't know my children exist. So please, Zara, run. Mira looked up from her ice cream, sensing the tension. Mommy, what's wrong? Kai's eyes went wide, reading the fear on Zara's face. The men were closer now. 20 feet. 15. Min-jae pulled away from Zara and walked toward them, intercepting. His posture changed completely. Shoulders back, chin up, the air stepping into place like armor. Zara grabbed Kai and Mira's hands. We're going to play a game, she said, keeping her voice light even as her heart hammered. We're going to walk very fast to the museum and find the dinosaurs, okay? But what about... Kai started. He'll catch up. Go. Now. She pulled them toward the opposite exit, walking fast but not running. Not yet. Behind her she heard voices. Min-jae's, cold and commanding. Another man's, amused and dangerous. She didn't look back, couldn't. Just kept moving, kept her children close, kept every instinct screaming at her to run, run, run under control because running drew attention, and attention meant death. They were almost to the park exit when she heard it. A shout, a scuffle, the sound of something hitting something. Mira whimpered. Kai's hand tightened on hers. Zara looked back just once. Min-jae was surrounded. Fighting. Moving with lethal efficiency, even outnumbered. And one of the men was looking past him. Looking at her. Looking at the children. Their eyes met across the distance. He smiled and pulled out a phone.